Dave Friedenthal is here, and he recognized 12 or 13 years ago that Wyoming is truly the next Silicon Valley, which is to say Carbon Valley, which is what we heard last night, that we have the opportunity to lead the way in technology. And it's been 12 years in the making, but Governor Friedenthal's vision is finally coming to fruition. But in the meanwhile, Governor Mead also stepped up to the plate and initiated, with the help of the legislature, the X Prize and the Integrated Test Center and all of the work that's going on in our nation's new energy research capital, Gillette, Wyoming. And that's on the other corner of our state, east of here, but it's an incredible place. It might not have the grand beauty of the Grand Tetons, but it is an amazing community full of people that are embedded in Wyoming's culture and our history and our future. So if at any point in your journeys across our great state you can get to Gillette, I guarantee you, you will enjoy it. But it's my definite privilege and unique honor, and only the first, and I will cherish this moment forever, to introduce Wyoming's current governor, Governor Mark Gordon. Governor Mark Gordon is a true son of Wyoming. When he has been asked to step up to the plate, he has never stepped back. He is a rancher. He is a financial expert. He served in our state government as treasurer and amplified our state's resources in ways that helped diversify our state's economy in ways that we could not even imagine. I think that we're very lucky to have 3 governors in a row, and even before them, that recognize that governors make a difference. And Governor Gordon is leading that charge now and is going to continue that legacy. He is committed to our state, he's committed to our nation, he's committed to our future. And I think you should all join me in thanking Governor Mark Gordon for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much. This is an honor. This truly is an honor. And Richard, it's a delight to be introduced by you. Richard served, I was on the board of the Nature Conservancy, when Richard came on, and Richard, you've added so much to that endeavor. I thought what I'd do this evening is just talk about Wyoming as a bipartisan state by virtue of the fact I brought a Democrat governor along with me. But it's a delight to have you all here, and welcome to Wyoming, and welcome to, I think, a future that we all can be very proud of. I'm sorry I wasn't here for more of the day, but the conversations I've had this evening, the excitement that is evident in this room, the talent and the expertise that are also here, I think are remarkable, and it gives me great hope. What I thought I might do is just kind of give you a little bit of biography and then talk a little bit about where we in Wyoming would like to go. So when I was 14 years old, my mother was from Maine, and she sent me back to a camp, and my camp counselor was a guy named Amory Lovins. And so from the time I was 14, Amory has been telling me about, you know, the soft energy path and the failure of nuclear power and how we were going to get a carbon-free future and all that sort of stuff. And Amory and I still have an argument, and I'll come back to that right at the end. But, you know, for a governor running in Wyoming, Amory was not an asset to have in my background. But through Amory, I ended up getting invited to serve on the board of the Sierra Club, which I also did, also a true confession for somebody from Wyoming. and stepped forward and ended up being the treasurer of that organization because I love public lands and because I felt it was so important that our country have a diversity of opinions. I'm a rancher by background, and I wanted to make sure that in my first conversation with Dave Brower, he understood that sitting in the middle of San Francisco versus me on my ranch, that the sustainability piece of that I felt was in my favor. He tended to agree, although he didn't really think the same way about prairie dogs that I did. But you know, fast forward, built some businesses here, and eventually went to work for Apache Oil Company, as did my daughter. And what was interesting to my daughter graduated from Stanford a few years ago and wanted to go save the world, and so stayed in San Francisco, went to work for Environmental Defense Fund, and got very frustrated because the solutions that were being put forward were not ones that had a human quotient to them, in her view. And sometimes they weren't as informed as she would have liked. Which is no indictment of Environmental Defense Fund. It simply is, it was an interesting juncture for her because then she decided what she would do. And now who knows about cows in this room? A lot of you do. Okay, so this was my daughter's comment to me. She said, "Dad, I am going to go to New Zealand where I'm going to work on a mom and pop organic dairy because that's a really cool thing. They want me to help calve heifers." So for those of you who don't know, heifers are young cows, and their first calf often has to be done with a little bit of assistance. And so I said, "Dear, that's great. So please tell me how many?" And she said, "Well, it's a small mom and pop operation, 2,000 head." So there is a moral to this story in that she really was interested in doing that, and of course New Zealand has a very strong sustainability picture and piece to it. She was very engaged, really wanted to go there, and found out the mom and pop operation was actually a major corporation, and it was an industrial farm, and that sort of kind of brought her back to Wyoming, where she ended up working also for Apache out of Houston. In EH&S, and started doing work on enhanced oil recovery and a number of other things. What she said, and I think that's what's so cool about this room tonight, is she said, "You know, Dad, when I was working at Apache, these are people who know what the problems are and know how to engage to try to find the right kinds of solutions." She was talking about fracking at the time. She's a hydrologist now, still working at the Woods Institute and very committed to correcting the environment. And I think the point I'm trying to make in all of this is that things are not as simple as we think. And this is a room dedicated to people who understand the complexities of the challenges facing us going forward. And the challenge is really to understand other points of view and try to incorporate them. And when we do that, we find the solutions that you're all working on here. So where is Wyoming in this? Well, luckily enough, after Sierra Club, which was not a great thing to recommend myself to Governor Friedenthal, but Apache maybe was a little bit better, Dave had the courage to put me in the Environmental Quality Council and began to sort of understand the scope of issues facing Wyoming. Where we are today, and you all know this because this is what this conference is about, is that we have political forces that are saying, you know, we have to be 100% renewable. That's the only way that we will ever get to a more carbon-sensible climate. I think I am the only governor who has talked about climate change openly, so in Wyoming, and it's because it is so critical to our state going forward. We need to understand that there are solutions present in this room, present in the industries that are here, that will lead to carbon negative technologies that are absolutely essential to the survival of this planet. And I don't say that to be dramatic. You all know that. If you look at the Paris Climate Accord 1.5 report, and you get a little past the first few lines, you'll notice that carbon capture and sequestration are essential components of that. And even if this is my conversation with Amory, who showed me a presentation he gave 2 years ago and said, must be hard to be the treasurer of a state that's going to not be able to fund itself in the future. And I fired back, as I often do, and said, well, I remember, Amory, when you were a proponent of E.F. Schumacher, where technologies are supposed to make sure that jobs are better for people, not just replace them, and that you looked at sustainability of society and all of those things going forward. But his graph showed me that in the Permian Basin, it is possible in 3 years to be 100% renewable with efficiency improvements, with solar, with wind, with biomass generation, and with batteries, and with some operational changes. 100% Permian Basin, you can do that, at least theoretically. And those of you who know Amory know that he's very good on theory. He's hard to argue with, though. But the fact of the matter, even in that scenario, and this is what I had to tell him, even in that scenario, what have you done to remove carbon from the atmosphere? Nothing. You have done nothing to remove carbon from the atmosphere in that scenario. So the challenge, which I'm so excited to be here with all of you, is that what we're working on in this room is the opportunity to take technologies that many consider moribund, revitalize them, be able to use the byproducts widely. And this is where Governor Freudenthal and Governor Meade before me, Jason, who is here, I think gave remarks last year about the ITC. This is where really Wyoming is trying to take a leadership role. How can we take what is considered an emission, a terrible thing, and turn it into something valuable? We can do that both pre-combustion and post-combustion. And our university is leading the way on that. And what's really exciting about that is that when you start to factor in to use economist terms, all the externalities and social costs, really what we're talking about here in utilizing our resources much better and being clever and courageous about that is we are talking about a more sustainable program going forward. And I have here on my lapel this little bird, the sage grouse, which Wyoming was kind of center stage, and really one of the great things that Governor Meade and Governor Freudenthal led to was an understanding of how you can have development and protect habitat for this bird that is so special. And here in Wyoming, we also love our vistas, not only these mountains that are out here that are just great to climb, wonderful to ski in, wonderful just to adventure in, but we also have great landscapes of open space and wonderful wind resources, which some covet, and some of us love to have the scenery as well. So the challenge for Wyoming is how do we balance all of these competing resource needs in a way that provides high-paying jobs, that provides sustainable employment, that provides for families and for recreation and for all of those things that this world is so glorious to give us. So I commend you on the work that you're doing here. I'm excited to see what's happening. And I'll just sort of finish with two thoughts. One is, as treasurer of Wyoming, I had the opportunity to work diligently at trying to figure out the best way to use our funds which we'd amassed, some $20 billion. Incidentally, for anybody in the audience, Wyoming was third in the world behind Norway and New Zealand for transparency in our sovereign funds. But what was exciting about a conference we pulled together here 4 years ago to talk about what happens in a carbon transition, how do we use our sovereign wealth to provide some underpinning for that? Because you see, sovereign wealth funds aren't like normal investors. Sovereign funds can have a very long hold on assets. So it is probably appropriate for us to look at ways that Abu Dhabi, who is here, New Zealand, which is very interested in Sustainable Planet, Temasek, one of Singapore's funds, the WAFRA, which is the Kuwaiti fund, AIMCO, Alberta Investment Authority, Alaska, Alabama, Wyoming, New Mexico, how we can combine to try to do the right kinds of investing that help underpin these things. So it's not just a federal government effort, but it is an investment effort that makes sense. And in this time when we talk about ESG investing, you know, really how does this room change that topic of conversation? And I think that's so important because 2 years ago at the Milken conference, the Japanese pension fund, 1 trillion in assets all invested in fixed income securities, was saying we need to make very large capital investments. But we aren't going to invest in anything to do with coal or oil or gas or anything fossil. And you know, the predictable conversation was, yay, that's great. Others were saying, well, you know, maybe that's not yours to make that decision because your pensioners, or if you look at fossil fuels investments, lots of those perform well. But the challenge really was, where do we take this world where it's not just politically facile to say, oh, we don't like carbon, where we actually take a leadership role and have the courage to advance our nation and our species. And that's really what we're about here in Wyoming. I thank you very much. I see I'm still in 20 minutes, so obviously I haven't wasted much time. But it is a delight to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This is the kind of thing that would be great to have on an annual basis, the kind of people that you have in this room, the leadership that's represented here. And so think about that. You know, we'd love to do this. I know it's not easy. It's not easy, but Jackson actually is, I used to serve on the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank Board, and as you know, the bankers all like to meet here. And so this is a great crucible for good ideas globally. And this is a room full of globally thinking people and forward-thinking people. Thank you very much.